name is Kelsey Olson. I'm the Events and Marketing Coordinator at Missoula Food Bank, and I am taking over for Erin today because our leadership team is in Portland for a conference right now. So today's topic, as you can see, is when a home isn't in the budget, barriers to affordable housing in Missoula. Just briefly wanted to talk a little bit about Missoula Food Bank and what we do. Currently we're in this is a picture of our storefront on 3rd Street. Let's see, if you look at our numbers from last year, we served over 17,000 people. And that includes almost 100,000 different services. So that includes our different programs like Roots, which delivers food to homebound seniors. We have Kids Table, which provides meals for lunches for kids in our schools, and Kids Empower Pack program, which is a weekend's worth of meals that goes home with these kids on the weekend. Who we serve, you can see 1 in 3 of our clients are children, 10% are seniors, 12% are veteran households, and then there are many more who are living with chronic illness or other disabilities. When we talk about food insecurity, Missoula Food Bank's mission is to provide emergency food service, and we strive to reduce hunger in our community. 38% of our clients visit us only one time, but we do see a lot of clients who come back every month. It depends. When we're looking at at-risk populations today, we're really focusing on those households with low incomes and talking about how affordable housing affects them. And we see a large number of our clients who come in are households with low incomes. Oh, and that's for next time. I'll show you that at the end. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Kathy McCart. She is our committee chair for our advocacy and education. And I wanted to let her speak a little bit about that committee, and then she'll introduce Andrea.
Thank you. My name is Kathy McCart. I'm on the board of directors for the Missoula Food Bank, and I'm on there because I'm a long-term volunteer at the food bank. Having worked at the food bank many years, I realized how important the food bank is to this community, and I wanted to take part in making sure that that continues, that service is still there. You may have heard Erin and food bank staff talk about our role in the community, and that is to provide emergency food. But additionally, we want to look at the systemic and long-term issues related to food insecurity. And so on the board, there's a group called the Advocacy and Education Committee, and I'm on that committee. And we work with staff to try to bring educational events to Missoula community that look at the long-term issues related to food insecurity. I'm very happy that you're here today. We are lucky to have an expert on the issue of one of the main items related to food insecurity, and that's the cost of affordable housing in Missoula, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, and I'm sure of that because when I moved here 30 years ago, I moved here for a higher paying job, and I got here and I thought I was going to be okay, and I thought it was going to be pretty good. And then when I realized the cost of housing here, I had to bump up my expectation for housing about 25% in order to be able to live someplace that gave me the amenities that I thought I wanted, the neighborhood, the schools, etc. So it's surprising to see that it's sort of surprising that it's still an issue 30 years later, but it's one of the biggest factors in why food insecurity can be an issue with families. So Andrea Davis is here today from Homeward to help us understand a little bit more about why it is a continuing issue. Andrea?
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate it. All right. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I appreciate the efforts of the Missoula Food Bank, all the staff and board, and in regards to creating a public and a community dialogue about these issues. I think it's really critical, and we all have a lot to learn. They're complex issues and sometimes very simple things. So I just appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. My name is Andrea Davis. I'm the Executive Director of Homeward. Our mission statement is on the screen here. Homeward is committed to providing safe, healthy, affordable housing using sustainable methods and promoting strong communities through housing counseling and education for those most in need. Homeward has been around for about 21 years. We got our start here in Missoula, and we've been working around the state ever since. Excuse me, I've had a little problem with my PowerPoint, so you might see me wrestling with it a little bit. We're a community housing development organization that just gives us a certain HUD status and ability to access some funds, which we might talk about in a little bit. Like I mentioned, we provide not only affordable housing in terms of developing affordable housing, both home ownership and multifamily development, but we provide housing counseling and education for those that may want to buy their first home, or folks that are looking to repair their credit, to be able to actually rent a unit in this market. We have an image here of the Thomas family who lived at one of our properties in Missoula, the Orchard Gardens property. And, oh, I just realized my voice got a lot louder when I stood by the microphone. That might be a good or a bad thing. You tell me. And we love this quote. This is such an awesome story. The two adults both moved into our Orchard Gardens property, which is off of Reserve Street. They were both single parents. They met at the property. They never thought that they could afford a home that they could purchase, and they had a large family. And that was one of the bigger issues, is trying to actually find a house big enough and land for all of their dogs and kids. So they took our first-time homebuyer education class and figured out a path to be able to purchase, and so that's what happened, and they purchased August 18th, 2011. So they're an excellent success story, somebody that has actually rented from one of our affordable properties, gone through our classes, and then purchased a home. So what's the deal in Missoula? You know, why do we have a need for affordable housing to begin with? So we have high housing costs. Kathy, you know, just mentioned that. And why is that? And there's a number of issues. One of those are likely a supply issue, right? We don't have all that much land to develop. We're surrounded by hills, rivers. We don't necessarily have a lot of infrastructure in our part of the state. In some ways, this is a really good thing. You know, we don't have sprawling subdivisions and houses, which I think we love about our area here in Missoula, but at the same time, our land is a bit constrained. We also are an attractive place to live. We have a lot of people that move here for quality of life. I know I certainly choose to stay here for quality of life. And so that can put pressure on housing prices, both home ownership and on rental housing. We have generally low wages in this area. We call this the housing index, that when you compare wages to the average cost of housing is what you call your housing index. If the housing index is a 1, that means that the person earning the average salary or the median salary can pay for the median house. In our area, and I may have to refer back to the Missoula Organization of Realtors report, I think we're something like 1.5. And that means that you need, you know, half again times the income in order to make enough money to pay for that median home price. So low wages, there's a number of reasons. Our community used to be one of extractive industries, you know, timber, mining, and those have gone away, obviously, with Smurfit Stone and Stimson lumber that was east of town here. We've lost a number of those manufacturing jobs, and we're largely a service-based economy. Services can also include medical work, and so to be clear, there's some very high-paying service jobs in this community, but there's a lot of low-wage service jobs. We see it all the time. In fact, you know, we see new development happen, like just what happened out by the old Kmart, and it's exciting to see these new stores go in. But you know what? They're half-time. They're paying maybe $10 an hour. So the folks that are getting new employment there are really stretched to try to make ends meet in order to find good housing here in Missoula. Unfortunately, in Montana, we are one of the states with the highest rate of people that are living paycheck to paycheck. We're also one of the states with the highest rate of people keeping 2 jobs, holding 2 jobs at the same time. We also have a low savings rate as a result, as you could imagine. So how could this all look? You know, housing can be safe, it can be healthy, it can be affordable, it can be dignified. It can be sustainably built, and this is Homeward's mission. And we have a couple images over here on this poster showing a couple properties that we have in Missoula. But just because you live in affordable housing does not mean that you need to live in a box. It does not mean that you need to be marginalized, live on the fringes of our economy, our society. Instead, building these properties in the core of our community, close to services, close to jobs, close to school, close to infrastructure, like the bus, like sidewalks, really reduces the cost of living and increases the quality of life, something that we're very, very vested in. Homeward is very vested in ensuring that affordable housing gets built in the core of our community. When it comes to finances, educated consumers confidently manage their money. They can choose to buy a home should that be their choice, and they can save for future goals. We as a society somewhat shirk this conversation. We often don't talk about money. Our parents don't talk about it sometimes with the kids. We don't really learn about it in school. Wow, now you're an adult, you've got credit card offers coming in the mail, maybe you go to the university and there's credit card offers, you know, left and right. People soon find themselves in some very tight situations if they don't understand what it means to build credit, what it means when they're offered certain loan products, how to avoid predatory loans, those types of things. So at Homeward, we, in our homeownership center, we teach a full continuum of services, starting with our financial literacy programs, where we teach a classroom style format, and then we also teach individual workshops at and coordinate with organizations like the YWCA's Transitional Housing Program, for example, and work with really disadvantaged populations and meet them where they're at to try to help land this message of financial knowledge empowerment. And really empowerment is largely where we're coming from. It's about trying to give people hope that they can actually make a difference in their own lives. And we also, well, I'll go through this here just a little bit. So we believe very much that home matters. Affordable housing is really the platform for our entire lives, or housing is the platform for our entire lives. Where we woke up this morning changed it impacted our view of the world. If you don't have stable housing or a stable roof over your head, or you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from, imagine the stress that's put on your day and how that influences then every action and potentially every interaction that you have throughout the day. Housing truly impacts stability in health, in education, in public safety, and the economy. One thing that I find to be very encouraging is the medical community is really starting to take a look at the reality of housing conditions and the impact of public health. So rather than treating that 6-year-old that keeps coming into the emergency room for, asthma, they, instead of just working within that emergency room, they're actually looking outside of the hospital and saying, what are the situations that these children are living in? And when it comes down to it, it's really housing that has one of the greatest impacts in terms of public health in this regard. I'm encouraged. It's something that we have been talking about for a long time. The medical community has some work to do on this, but we're fortunate that we've got some leaders in our state that are really starting to help us all bridge this conversation. At Homeward, we serve a very wide range of people. Really, everybody needs affordable housing. So we're working with people that are working. We're working with people that are single parents, dual income households, people that are retired, folks that are disabled, formerly homeless individuals, survivors of domestic violence, and a lot of families. Generally speaking, the folks that we serve both in our affordable housing rental properties as well as those that come through our homeownership center, and particularly those that are in our financial education program, are earning 50% of the area median income or less. And so that generally is about $11 an hour. When you open the paper, there are a lot of $11 an hour jobs. And like I was saying at the beginning, some of those are part-time. So the challenge that a lot of working families in particular have is that they may be holding a job, and I'll just pick on Kohl's because they're new in town, nothing against Kohl's, but it's a half-time position. Then they try to go out and get another half-time position, but those schedules change. They're never static. So you have these folks that are trying to put together a couple of different positions, and oftentimes it's very difficult to put 40 hours together in a situation like that. If they're out there in the market and they are competing with everybody else for affordable housing, they're truly at a loss. Right now, easily housing prices are higher than this, but I'll refer back to the last statistic that's been really calculated, and that was in the 2014 Missoula Organization of Housing report, 2015 report, 2014 data. And a 2-bedroom apartment in Missoula goes for $800, and that does not include utilities. So you could round that up maybe to $950 a month. That is potentially somebody's entire take-home. That is somebody's entire paycheck in a lot of these situations. So, like I was mentioning, we create sustainable communities through programs, through housing, and Homeward is dedicated to sustainable choices. So we do a number of things to ensure that we're making good decisions today for tomorrow. This gives a little example of where we're located around the state. Our homeownership center programs are only here in Missoula. We have a regional homeownership center here in Missoula. I have information on the table back there I'd encourage you to take with you. But we've been developing affordable housing around the state, first in Missoula, then in Billings, and now in a number of different communities, because a lot of these areas do not have the capacity to develop their own affordable housing, and they're quite honestly have come to us for assistance. So we're trying to figure out how to purchase an airplane at this point. We don't exactly have it in the budget, but we're trying to figure out how to get around the state. This is just a little image of who we serve. Some of the wonderful people, of course, that utilize our services and our housing. I went through our programs before, but it really is a continuum, all the way from basic financial literacy programs all the way through foreclosure prevention counseling. Unfortunately, folks still find themselves in some tough situations. In our area, it's often because of health or loss of income. It's not typically because people have made a bad choice on a mortgage. Montana was actually fairly conservative in terms of the banking system. We didn't have a lot of predatory loans, although we did have quite a bit, and we're seeing all of those somewhat conclude. The foreclosure crisis in the state has definitely subsided quite a bit, which is a good sign. We also work with several employers to provide assisted housing programs. We just did a series of workshops for the Missoula Federal Credit Union. I don't know if anybody in here is a member, but you may have gotten some material about Missoula Federal Credit Union and Homeward partnering up to do some short first-time home buyer workshops. And then we also do some post-purchase housing counseling, and we're wanting to expand our energy efficiency workshops for first-time home buyers, so people can figure out how to reduce their energy consumption, both, one, of course, it's great for the environment, but to reduce their cost of living. So I mentioned we're a HUD housing counseling agency, and we're one of only 3 regional homeownership centers in the state of Montana. Our homebuyer education is, excuse me, I know I'm kind of all over the place with my wackadoo PowerPoint over here. Homebuyer education is really about teaching the risks and rewards of homebuyer education, and it's really going through the steps of what it takes to purchase a home intelligently. We have some folks that are just dipping a toe. They want to know what it's about. And then about half of the folks that come through our class are really lined up to actually purchase. If they're not mortgage ready, if they're not ready right now to actually take out a mortgage, we'll work with them one-on-one in a pre-purchase housing counseling situation. We pull your credit report, we review that with you, we set up an action plan. So if your plan is, I want to buy a house in 6 months, we go through your entire financial situation and we set about a plan to do that. We have some great examples of folks that came in for pre-purchase counseling, and one couple came in and they really wanted to buy a house. This was in the summer, so we were counseling them in last winter, and after one counseling session, they left with that action plan, and over the course of 6 months, they improved their credit score by 50 points. That is a dramatic difference if that just gets you over the edge to be qualified for good financing. Because keep in mind, you can get financing sometimes when you've got a lower credit score, but boy, oh boy, you might have a higher interest rate, and you might be furthering your financial complications. So our homebuyer education is probably our marquee class. We see about 40 people a month through the education program, and at least almost half of that again through our pre-purchase counseling. I mentioned our financial literacy program. It's a free class that teaches people how to budget, save, and improve credit. 90% of the participants are low income, and 80% are women. So we see a lot of women coming through the class. We surmise Why might that be? There's a number of different reasons. I can't say exactly statistically, but we probably see a lot of single mothers that are trying to come through our class and figure out how to keep a roof over everybody's heads. And then often the attendees in our financial literacy program are living on $15,000 a year or less. So we do capture this information. That's less than $11 an hour full-time. $11 an hour full-time is about $20,000 a year. So either they're part-time workers, they're not quite earning $11 an hour, they're earning minimum wage. There's a number of different circumstances, but that's the average income that we see. I mentioned we provide foreclosure counseling services as well. Ideally, what we're doing is just trying to keep people stabilized. If foreclosure is imminent, we try to transition them to other options. And I mentioned our other programs here. We are green builders at Homeward. And what does that mean? Well, we've been doing sustainable development. I'm trying to keep an eye on time. Am I doing okay? Okay. We've been doing green building for 21 years. We do that because we're really interested in building for the future, but not destroying the environment today. There's a lot of benefits to sustainable development. There is benefits to our local economy. We hire a lot of local contractors, manufacturers, and vendors. When we build with fewer chemicals and more natural products in the home, we reduce chemical exposure to families and children. So, we see a lot of folks that come through with chemical exposure illnesses. There's probably a number of diseases out there in the world that we could probably attribute to chemicals, but nobody's willing to say it yet. And so I had a client yesterday, a tenant yesterday at our Orchard Gardens tour that actually said that was the first thing they noticed when they moved into a brand new apartment, that you couldn't smell anything. And if you've ever walked into a brand new home, it stinks. It stinks like chemicals. Imagine being exposed to that all the time. Being a 6-month-old baby, being exposed to that all the time. Something that we're really proud of. And then I mentioned where we build. Homeward really focuses on our locations of our properties. So we're located close to services. We reutilize underutilized sites, like where our offices are, that building that you see in that poster at the corner of Russell and Broadway. That was an old bowling alley. That was a Liberty Lanes bowling alley, and we deconstructed that bowling alley. And we ended up saving about 40 million tons of garbage. Now that includes the asphalt, the old asphalt that was part of the parking lot there. But 40 million tons from going to the landfill. And because we were able to build densely on this site, we were able to park underground, and we were able to then preserve a lot of green space on the surface, which in that part of town there's not much. So because these units are smaller, there's studios and 1-bedrooms with some 2-bedrooms, we have a lot of seniors and a lot of folks with disabilities that live in these properties. We all are going to have a disability at some point, even if it's just temporary. So the reality is our housing stock needs to really reflect that. We need more what they call universally designed housing, places where people that might have mobility impairments can actually get into a building, visit somebody, or actually rent an apartment. So these buildings are fully visitable, universally designed. And as a result, we have a number of people that need that kind of design that live there. We don't allow pets at our facilities for a number of different reasons, but we have a lot of service animals and companion animals that live here, and so it's pretty cute in the morning because I get to work and there's a little coffee clutch out in the courtyard, and they're talking and they're walking their little dogs, and some walk their cats, Susan. It's pretty adorable. Anyway, this is the Equinox and the Solstice building in Missoula, and I just wanted to run through a couple of properties that we have here. Fireweed Court, this is off of Russell Street. The image here is of residents building a straw bale wall. One of the things that we like to incorporate into our properties is art, because why not? I mean, it's just one of the things in terms of aesthetics and beauty that we really believe people should have the opportunity to be exposed to. This wall actually is a protection system. Russell is obviously a very busy street, and they needed a noise barrier, so we built a straw bale mosaic wall. And rather than just have a blank wall, the residents actually did a mosaic art piece led by a professional artist. It was really exciting. That wall has been hit 3 times by vehicles coming off of Russell Street. It's pretty interesting. So it's a safety feature, and it's an artistic feature. Lenox Flats downtown, it's a historic rehab property, commercial on the first floor and 2 floors of residential on the second and third. This is the Gold Dust, which is across from the Kettle House. Gold Dust was there first. However, most people know about the Kettle House north side, so that's it. Now it's landmark. This is our Orchard Gardens property. I've been talking about it a little bit because we just did a tour there yesterday. This is a really unique piece of property and a development that I'm just so proud of, because it's a partnership with Garden City Harvest, and we're here talking about food insecurity, and this is an excellent example of a way to incorporate both housing security and food security. Almost, let's see, about 10 years ago, just checking my time, Homeward envisioned building a property on the urban fringe, and so back in 2003, 2004, housing development in Missoula was just hot and heavy, and there was a lot of contention in a lot of neighborhoods about the neighborhood being changed, and rightly so. I mean, I have concerns too about how my neighborhood eventually gets developed. I want it to be a beautiful place to live. Of course, I want my property values to remain. There's a number of legitimate concerns there, and so this property that we found was very underzoned. It was zoned for 4 units per acre. That's a very suburban and rural zoning, but it is located immediately west of a reserve street. In fact, there were parcels of land just south of us, closer to 3rd Street, that had a much higher density. So it didn't really make sense that this property hadn't been rezoned yet, but that's one of the barriers to affordable housing in Missoula, is that we do not have properly zoned land to build affordable housing. What I just showed you earlier, the Equinox and the Solstice property, that's built on commercial land. As a nonprofit developing affordable housing, we have to compete with commercial developers paying commercial prices for affordable housing, when we really should be paying residential prices for affordable housing. But the problem is, as a community, we have not zoned properly. It's a political issue, it's a hot button issue, but it's something that we need to address, and it is a barrier to affordable housing. So what we did here at Orchard Gardens was we went about a rezoning and created a special zoning district. There's 4 acres on this site. We knew we wanted to try to preserve open space, and that really came about through a community design meeting that we held, and we typically do these for all of our new construction projects. And what came out of that community design meeting is that people wanted to see the rural heritage of this area be preserved. This, of course, Orchard Homes is the neighborhood, and it has that name for a reason. It was full of orchards and agriculture for a century or more. So that was what influenced the design. The main building on the left that you see, which looks like a barn, actually has 22 apartments inside of it. And then that farmhouse on the right-hand side is built to look like an old farmhouse. Most people think we preserved an old building, but in fact that's a new building. And it has 6 units in it. It just looks like a big giant house. And then what you don't see is there's some row houses there. There's a total of 35 units. We were able to park underground. So under that big red building, there is parking. And there is some surface parking. But because we were able to park underground, we preserved 2 acres of space, of open space. And that is what we preserve for agriculture into perpetuity. And we partner with Garden City Harvest there. Much of the food that comes to the food bank from Garden City Harvest comes from this property. It is just a beautiful partnership. We ask that they prioritize our residents that live there. So if the residents want a plot to garden at, they do get priority over the rest of the community. But if they don't take it, the rest of the community is welcome to come on. There are community garden plots there. They have a community shares agriculture program that comes out of there. If you buy one of those, you go pick up your veggies from there. They have a volunteer for veggie program. They have one of their bigger farms here, and they actually have grown our orchards. One of the things about offering Garden City Harvest long-term stability is that they were able to invest in a farm, because you just don't start growing things, right? You have to nurture that soil. So they invested in a farm and an orchard, and in fact, over the last 2 days, we've been munching on apples and plums from that orchard. Finally, it's producing, and it's just amazing. The thing that I love about this property is that it's the kids that have totally gravitated to the garden space. They had to create a kids garden because the kids were almost out of control. I mean, they loved it so much. They had to grow a pizza garden, and they had to, they do these really unique programs. We built a straw bale structure on this site that has a barn on the backside, a real barn, and a small space, and a community room on the front side. And Garden City Harvest does do some cooking classes there, and they do cooking classes for adults, but they also do cooking classes for kids. So kids really get to understand the entire food cycle and have access to good quality, affordable housing. The beautiful thing about the Garden City Harvest program is they accept EBT, the EBT program, or food stamps. So folks that live at Orchard Gardens have an opportunity to go to a semi-weekly food stand and purchase vegetables literally right out their front door. Or they could volunteer for veggies and not pay for anything. It's pretty cool. This is a property we just purchased recently. It was an old 8-plex. We threw some colorful paint on it. In case you notice, that's kind of our mark. We like those colors. But one of the issues with housing in Montana is that there are affordable housing properties all over that are transitioning to market rate. And it's a huge issue not only here in Missoula, but all over the state of Montana. So in addition to building new construction, we've been focused on what we call acquisition and rehab of existing properties. A lot of them were built in the 60s and 70s. They need improvements in terms of all their building systems, their windows, their doors. And building code was much different at the time. So we really improved the quality of the facility through building systems, trying to reduce the energy costs and the comfort for the folks that live there. This is the location of our newest project here in Missoula, and we're calling it Sweetgrass Commons. It's located at the old Sawmill District, which is down, by Osprey Stadium. Our property is going to be located on California Street, and we're working right now to close all of the financing for that property to begin construction. We're hoping mid-October. We're going to build 26 units there, responding to market needs. For a long time, Missoula, our market studies were not showing that we needed any additional 3-bedroom units. Families were getting smaller. Our demographics showed that we had a need for more studio and 1-bedrooms and some 2-bedrooms. Although 2-bedrooms get built out, I'll just tell you, it's an easier development pattern. So that's why you see a lot of 2-bedrooms in the conventional housing market. And but we're actually building studios 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms in a 26-unit property here at the old Sawmill District because we have seen a need for larger units. Obviously, it's either combined families or families with children. The beautiful part of this property, it's just so exciting it's what they call a Brownsfield. It was a cleanup of the old Champion Mill site. It is ideally located for housing of all kinds. And we're very excited to have affordable housing be part of it because it's located in a neighborhood that is actually historically low and moderate income. It's across the street from downtown. And yes, there are a lot of high-paid people that work downtown, but there are a lot of low-income wage earners downtown. And quite frankly, they deserve to be able to walk to work just like anybody else. And they deserve to be able to walk over California Street Bridge or ride their bike and easily get to work. Transportation is, bless you, transportation is almost half again what it costs for housing in this country. Statistically, Americans spend about 50% of their income on housing and transportation. That does not leave a whole lot. Now, I actually handed out a budget which is super small. I apologize. It's kind of hard to read. But I wanted to give you all an example, since we're talking about this right now, of what it might look like to rent or to buy a home. I have it right here. Here we go, just a couple more. Brendan Bowles, our housing specialist, put this together for us. You bet. So the top chart, oh, excuse me. Anybody else? Chris, get one? Okay, you bet. So the top is the example I was talking about earlier. And this is actually, this top example is a real case that we've been working with recently. This person earned $10 an hour. They worked 40 hours a week. So their gross income was $1,733 a month. They had a medical payroll deduction, meaning their insurance. They're fortunate enough to have insurance. So they pay $75 for that. They originally had a 401k, but you see that says 0 because they could no longer afford a retirement plan. So that's a significant issue here, right? We have people that are working full-time that cannot plan for their futures. So that's unfortunately a 0. And then payroll tax is $122. So those are the deductions that came out of that person's salary. So now they have a total net income of $1,536. The expenses, this person was paying $800 a month for rent. And we use that example because, again, that was an average rental price for a 2-bedroom apartment in the 2015 Missoula Organization of Realtors report. On top of that, $100 in credit card payments. Before I go on, though, in parentheses where it says expenses rent, and there's a parentheses that says 46%, affordable housing, it's considered to be affordable when you pay 30% of your gross income towards rent and utilities. This person's paying 46%. And 60% of Missoulians pay over 40% of their income. 46% of renters pay over 30% of their income, yeah. So, then we've got utilities at $110 a month. Garbage and water, we're gonna assume the landlord covers that. Garbage, it's required by law, just in case you didn't know that, City of Missoula. I have a neighbor who I continue to battle with. My poor renters, I'm like, it's not your obligation to pay that garbage, but it's the landlord, I can't get him to turn around. Cell phone, TV, internet, $85. That's a pretty reasonable package, I would say, for all those things. Auto, gas, maintenance, and registration, $150. These are all just general numbers. Car insurance, $35 a month. And groceries and household supplies, $250. That leaves this person $6 a month. This is a real case. This is a real case where somebody came in and basically said, how am I going to try to, I'm just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. There are things we can do here, right? Well, you don't have to have a cell phone, TV, or internet. Most people have a cell phone rather than a landline, so you pretty much have to have a cell phone. And yes, you can give up your car, maybe. In the city of Missoula, we're quite lucky because we have a robust mountain line bus system for the size of city that we live in a rural state. But most of us still need a car. Some people might work out of town. So the reality is most people on very fixed incomes still do have vehicles. Although I will tell you, a lot of folks that we serve, in particular some of our smaller properties like the Lenox Flats property located downtown, most of those people choose not to have a car or can't afford it. But they live across the street from the Mountain Line Transfer Center, and that's one way that they're able to get around town and make things work. So that's a scary thing. If one thing comes up in this person's life, if they get laid off, if they get sick and lose their job, I don't know. How does this person rebound from that, right? Can't do it. The other examples down below are a home purchase. In that same Missoula Organization of Realtor report, we actually went on their website to get an updated number. The median home price, that's not the average, that's the median. That means it's exactly in the middle of where all home prices have been. Some are above, half are below. $245,000 in the city of Missoula. Well, our median income is $46,000 a year. So if we follow the column on the left-hand side, that's a gross income of $3,843 a month. After you take out all deductions, and we included retirement here, so we're going to assume that somebody that's earning $46,000 a year is contributing to a 401k or some other employment plan. So that's $961, net income of $2,800, and then we walk down to a fairly real situation. PITI means your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That's an escrow payment. And in this case, when you don't have a big down payment, you're paying mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance is pretty darn expensive. It doesn't go towards your mortgage, it just ensures that you're going to pay it. So the challenge with folks that have limited incomes that are trying to build assets and want to build a home, but they could barely get into that home with the minimum down payment, are at a bit of a disadvantage because they're paying more per month than somebody that is able to somehow afford a larger down payment, whether that be through savings, whether that be through an inheritance. A number of different ways people can do that, but it's challenging for folks that are making minimum down payments. We're going to assume that there's a student loan. Often we see student loans in the financial counseling picture here. $125 is actually pretty reasonable, so we put $125 in there. Credit cards, again, $100. Their total debt to gross income is 45%. Just saying, that is really high. Most lenders want to see a 42% ratio. That means that all of your costs, all of your expenses compared to your income is 42%. Well, in this example, that's 45%. We're already sort of outside of that a little bit. Again, utilities, water, garbage. We had a slightly higher registration here. We just added some kind of real world situations. Increased groceries and household supplies, assuming it might be a larger family. Entertainment and pet care, because you know what? Most people want to buy a house so they can get a dog. We have a lot of people that come through our home buyer education class that one of their goals for home ownership is having a pet. So we put some pet care in there. In this example, somebody that is buying at the median home price and earns the median income has $7 left over at the end of the month for average. And this is an average. Every situation is different. There are so many circumstances, but I wanted to illustrate for you what a typical situation is. Now, the example to the right is the income it would take, really, to afford that median home price at $245,000. And what that does after we walk through the whole piece, and when I mean what does it take, that means that they are paying, instead of a 39% PITI, they're paying a 30% PITI. Remember that 30% is affordable. So if we want to drill to that 30%, somebody would actually need to earn $60,000 a year. Now maybe that's two people earning $30,000. Maybe it's one person earning $60,000. At the end of the day, they would have resources left over of $473 a month. Better, not great, not a whole lot if you want to be able to save up to go to a trip to Europe someday or something like that. So this is just an illustration, and it really is just an illustration. There's a lot of dynamics, but I wanted to walk through what it really looks like. And if you've got somebody that is a retiree that's on minimum Social Security income, Susan Kohler, you're in the room, not to put you on the spot, but you know this more than anybody, Missoula Aging Services. We have a lot of folks in Missoula and in the state of Montana that are earning the minimum Social Security. My dad is one of them. We're talking $775 a month. $775 a month. Rent is more expensive than $775 a month, let alone trying to make an entire household budget out of that. We are one of the more aging states in this country. We're already one of the older states. By 2030, they estimate that Montana will be the third or fourth oldest state in this country. We need to have not only a housing stock that addresses the physical needs, but we have an issue with housing affordability, because while there might be a lot of retirees that either live here now and are going to retire comfortably or move here, and we will see a lot of people move here to retire comfortably. We already are, and we will see more. But there are folks that have lived here their whole lives and scratched out a living that are going to try to continue here until the day they die on that income. And we need to have a housing stock that addresses that. And quite frankly, we don't have enough. But that's why it's important that we build new housing and we preserve existing affordable housing. It's also important why we partner with other organizations. The Garden City Harvest example is a wonderful example. Partnering today with the Missoula Food Bank, getting the message out, partnering with the United Way and all of the other service organizations that they fund in order to augment each other's services and programs. NeighborWorks Montana is a statewide organization that we're part of. They help us with our whole HUD housing counseling program, and they're also a lender for first-time home buyers, so they do some down payment assistance, and so we partner with them to do a lot of good work. But we partner with social service agencies, the city, the county, state government, and the federal government. And then affordable housing agencies and advocates. We partner with for-profit developers. A lot of the work that we've been doing around the state of Montana, we've been partnering with a for-profit developer, because it takes all of us to get this done. This is a little bit of funding for how Homeward makes it work. We earn some fees off of the projects we build, but we also write grants to foundations and to other grant sources, and we do individual fundraising all day, every day, in order to make this all happen. We also do corporate sponsorships and business donations and any number of things that most nonprofits do in order to keep serving their mission. So that's really it for my presentation, and I think we could probably roll into the discussion piece here. We've got a few minutes left. How does that sound? Do we want to answer any questions first? No?
Yeah, what's the federal poverty level for family of 4 right now.
Oh my goodness.
24 something.
So it's, you know what, it's somewhere around, I'm sorry I can't answer that question. Our programs are not necessarily on the poverty. Here, one of the interesting things about all the programs meshing together is there's the poverty level, and then there's HUD, and HUD's entire, and they're not necessarily the same thing. So it's, you know, it's somewhere around there. I'm sorry I can't say specifically.
Well, I was just looking at some of your examples.
24,000.
I got you.
Yeah, yeah.
24 a little plus.
Amazing for a family of 4.
For a family of 4.
Amazing. Susan.
I had a, we were talking about the chemicals, and so what's the, I mean, like, you know, carpeting, paint,
Exactly.
all of that. So what do you do instead of the carpeting and the paint and that kind of thing?
Good question. I guess I'll just get this out of the way so it's not distracting everybody. So we use what's called low or no volatile organic compounds. That includes the adhesive that glues the carpet down and the carpet itself. So that includes the paint. When we started doing this, we had to special order VOC-free or low VOC paint. It wasn't even available. Now Home Depot carries it. I mean, it's really exciting to see how much green building and sustainability has come into the mainstream, but we have a long, long way to go. But it's good to see that it's more accessible. The carpet that we often use recycled content carpet, and then it's formaldehyde-free. Our cupboards are formaldehyde-free. Unfortunately, a lot of the cupboards that you buy, just the standard countertop and cupboards that you buy, contain formaldehyde as a preservative. They don't need to do that, but it's been a long-standing manufacturer habit and something that you wouldn't expect. And of course, that's off-gassing. So it's exactly all of those things. Yeah, it's mostly the adhesives, the paint, and then the products themselves. We try to purchase recycled content cabinet and countertop as much as we can. It can be hard to find. There used to be a manufacturer in eastern Montana that made wheat board cabinets, and we have a few properties with them, and they're beautiful. The chaff of the wheat, after they harvest the wheat, they were recycling the shaft of the wheat to actually make a condensed product. It was really cool. Painted, it was gorgeous. Then, for whatever reason, Dow Chemicals bought it.
So is it more expensive to do this?
It is a little bit more expensive.
Because of the fact that it's a limited market, there's not as much volume as you find in other products?
Some yes, some no. So like the VOC paint is a good example of something that's become mainstream, and it's exactly the same price. Some of the things that we may have to special order, we build better cabinetry and better, because it lasts long term, we put better windows and doors in our properties because they last longer. So it's a higher construction cost up front, but we save money in the long term in terms of maintenance. And we also are then turning over less garbage into the landfill, quite frankly, because hollow core doors, we've all rented a house with hollow core doors, right? I'm like, there's a hole in the door I'm renting? I mean, it's pretty easy to put your hand through one of those things. Well, you can imagine in a family unit, if your entire interior are hollow core doors, you're replacing those doors a lot. So when we have solid doors in there, we have better insulation opportunities and less maintenance costs. Siding, all of those kinds of things. You know, we put some investment in up front, and there is a slight increase in cost. It depends on the product itself. Over time, the market has started to respond to better products, and so these costs have come down quite a bit. An example is that, like at Orchard Gardens property, we did a ground source heat pump, which means we have these big hoses that are all the way through the ground that bring water into a holding tank, and it transfers the heat of the ground to the furnace. So when we heat the inside of an apartment, we only have to heat from 45 degrees, not from 0. So you save on heating and cooling costs that way. Well, you need land to do that. Orchard Gardens was big enough to do that. And at the time, gas forced air furnaces weren't that efficient. But now, gas forced air furnaces are 96% efficient. So for us, in the properties we've been developing recently, we've been developing and putting in just regular gas forced air furnaces, high quality ones, but they're easier to maintain. You know, the general maintenance guy or gal knows exactly how to replace those filters. We don't have to get anything from France. You know, we learn. So the market's been responsive, and you know, I will say that because we build on the inner core of the community, we pay higher costs for land. But ideally, you can build more units that way, so offsetting the cost of land in that way.
You mentioned that you think one of the factors contributing to higher housing costs is a lack of supply. And it feels like in the last couple of years that there have been new market price apartment complexes going up all over town.
Right?
So I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about what you think the longer term impacts of that will be, and is that increasing access to, it's not affordable housing, but is that improving access to market price housing, and how that'll play out?
Yeah, I think a great question. Assuming that folks have the ability to move into those market rate conventional units and free up other affordable apartments would create more affordable housing. That's been our assumption, and I have been asking this question. People keep asking me, apartments are getting built everywhere. What's happening? Do we have a big vacancy rate in Missoula? Are we overbuilt? So because we had to update our market study for the property called Sweetgrass Commons, so I just talked to the market study analyst 2 weeks ago. And I haven't received the market study yet, so I don't have it exactly in writing, but I asked him, so all these conventional units, you know, they're either conventional market or they're high-end. He said that they've all been absorbed, and that he still thinks the vacancy rate in Missoula is 1% to 2%. A healthy vacancy rate in a community is 5%. So either we're seeing an explosion of population, and that's what I asked him, and we have seen an increase in population in Missoula.
By how much?
I want to say that it was like 3%, which is pretty good. It was a pretty high.
But to coming in because of what industry?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know. You know, I don't know. Are we seeing people? Is it the baby boomers that are starting, you know, to retire? I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not exactly sure.
The enrollment at the university is down slightly.
Yeah, and the university thinks that it's going to stay that way. That, I don't know if you read that article. The president was basically saying that the numbers that we had historically seen might have been artificially high, and that where they're at right now is probably the traditional enrollment rate. However, it's still 13,000 students that come into this market, and while some of them stay, a lot of them are in and out, and that fluctuation does create some pressure on the housing market. The University of Montana has between 3,000 and 4,000 units themselves, so there's 10,000 people out there looking for housing every semester.
Is there any effort for shared housing, coordinated shared housing, whether it's with older adults and students matched with older adults, and is there anybody coordinating and that kind of thing? It seems to me it's been successful in other communities across the country. Has it been floated around here at all?
It has been floated around. I am not aware of anything that is actually underway. I think it's been floated around as a concept, something that's really, I think, very intriguing, but nothing is actually, starting to be built or any real traction there yet. I think it's a really interesting conversation, though, that we should continue to have, because, we see a lot of people, first-time home buyers that come through our class. They're 35 years old, 30 years old, 25 years old, still want a single-family home. They want a yard. They want to have a dog. They want to grow a garden. They want some space. That's what we typically see, although we see changes in that demographic nationally, right? People want access to good bus service, and they want access to trails, and they want access to walkable neighborhoods, sustainable community. And then we see people through their life cycle, and we see folks that are either retiring or not maybe retiring, but maybe they're empty nesters. They're looking to downsize, and they're looking for a more simple situation. And our housing supply is not meeting it. No, exactly. Yeah, Montana's an interesting place because culturally people like their space, and it can be hard to live in an apartment complex. And we've probably all lived in one, right? And we've all had good neighbors and mediocre neighbors. But hey, I live in a single family home, and I have mediocre neighbors sometimes, and sometimes really good neighbors, so it just happens everywhere. But I think we really need to start addressing the housing type that's available, especially for seniors, so they can start to move out of the single family home that they're holding on to, that maybe free it up for another
Well,
household.
in the whole visitability ordinance is pushing developers towards that with the incentive they get to the head of the pack for permits if they build in visitability, which is a little bit lower level than universal design, but it's still better stock. And I guess we can't make that a mandatory ordinance. That only can happen by the state. So the fact that we had issues with that, and then what do they refer to, when you can add on to your house as a second unit, what's that called?
Accessory dwelling unit?
Yeah, and that was, and I'm curious now that they've allowed that, how many have been built, any issues, how everybody was afraid what was gonna ruin their, their neighborhoods. Because I think, one of the things that it came with that was it had to be attached to the house, and yet there are people that have areas that you could probably build and within their property and not have it attached. So I was just curious if there's, I'm not familiar with where the housing group that you're talking about, yourself and others and partners, are at working collaboratively to explore some of these other options, and who's doing the research to see if the accessory dwelling units have gone well, what the issues are been, because that's all going to impact the ability to provide the kind of housing that's going to be needed in the future.
Exactly. That's so well said. One of the things that I'd like to see spring back up, the mayor had an affordable housing task force that took a back seat when the housing market quieted down. And now that we're seeing pressure, the economy is doing better and housing prices are on the rise again, there's more pressure on the housing market. And I think we're going to see that again. I, in fact, meet with him on Monday, and that's one of the questions I have for him is, are you going to start this up? Are we going to, as a coalition of housing providers? So I think we need to do a better job, actually, as a group, although as housing organizations, we're often in the same conversation and in the same group, but we need more than just housing organizations themselves talking about this amongst ourselves. We need to be working with the businesses and the community at large to come up with some solutions. Because the accessory dwelling unit example that you just gave was a very hot button issue. It, along with a couple of other things that would have allowed for affordable housing, like density bonuses, like these things called planned neighborhood clusters, which Fire Week Court is an example of one. And that just allows you to take the same density but move it around the site in a way that better utilizes the space. So you can create open space, you can park differently, you can preserve those 150-year-old trees, whatever it is. And all of those things were thrown out when we had so much contention, when development was so crazy back in 2004, 2005, 2006. And now we just got the ability to build accessory dwelling units, which are cottage houses, mother-in-law homes, alley houses, and Missoula's full of them. So it's not exactly like we didn't have any. I can tell you that very few have been built. And I think we need to rely on the city government and the development services department there to assess who's coming in, how are they getting built, and the frequency. But the ordinance is so restrictive to actually build one that we're not going to see a lot. It's unfortunate because we don't have a lot of space here, and it's a really good way, I think, in my opinion, to utilize our existing infrastructure and be able to get more dense, but not so high, right? You can, I have them throughout my alley, so for me, I live around them all the time, and it's not an issue. But I know that the concern people have, like the certain neighborhoods were really concerned, like they're going to fill up with college students and things like that. Actually, college students are not the demographic that live in accessory dwelling units. Typically, they're sweet, beautiful little cottages that professionals live in, or the owner of the house moves in and then they rent out their home. That's an interesting retirement package, a way for somebody to actually have some income. But yeah, we haven't seen a lot get built just because the ordinance themselves is
Well, there's intentional communities that are, that people are doing, the baby boomers coming together and buying an acre of land and putting 4 houses on it or a fourplex that 3 of their friends live in. They keep one open for the kids to come home.
Yeah.
You know, there's just so many more innovative ways that can be utilized. A lot of split level homes that, and I'm an example of it, you know, renovate the lower level, have it as a rental unit, they can mow my lawn. But, you know, just making it easier to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the piece of the accessory dwelling unit that people don't pay much attention to,
Yeah.
is the modification within a person's home to allow people to live in it is considered an accessory dwelling unit. So to see if more and more people are doing that, because the affordability of the cottages and having to have the same, you know, all the rules with it.
Right.
I think that a lot of the needs of older adults are similar to the needs of college students, and, you know, it's an intergenerational opportunity.
Yeah, I agree.
That I wish we would have. And you might have mentioned this before I got here, but, you know, I have a son on SSI, 5-year waiting list,
For Section 8?
Section 8 housing.
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah, right.
And
Wow.
he's got 1 year now. So, you know, that's another issue. So that speaks to the demand for that affordable housing. What are we doing, or what ordinance do we have in place that talks about when developers build an apartment complex? Isn't there that they would have to have at least a couple of units that were affordable? Is that something that's done around the country?
In some places, and typically that's called inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
And so some places are doing that, and there's varying success. The better the market does, the worse inclusionary zoning does. And like I was just reading about some court cases. There's a court case in Chicago right now, for example. So it probably depends, you know, private developers are saying it's a takings claim. And so in inclusionary zoning, you could package it with a lot of incentives. And one of the things you could say is, hey, if you're going to develop a 30-unit apartment or 30-unit subdivision even, a certain number of those have to be for affordable housing. It could be affordable home ownership. It could be affordable rental housing. A lot of the inclusionary zoning ordinances that have been unsuccessful often allow people to pay a small fee to get out of it. And, you know, a fee of $5,000 does not build an affordable unit. So it takes a lot of those 30-unit subdivisions to get actual pot of money to do anything with. There needs to be a real fee associated with that. And if you allow for a density bonus, so if you say, well, you could build 30 homes, we'll put in a density bonus of 2 more homes, but 4 of them have to be affordable, then that might address the cost concerns that developers have. So developers say, well, if you make me keep 2 of those units affordable, then that cost has to go somewhere. If I can't sell at $245,000 and I have to sell at $185,000, that difference has to be spread out against all the units. And so then all the homes are more affordable. So that's the counter argument to it. I think it's worth exploring this, and I think it's something we need to continue to look at in Missoula for sure. We don't have it in place here.
The complex near the Good Food Store that's not yet inhabited, but is getting, I guess they're starting to rent them out. They displaced a lot of low income.
Yes, the trailer park there.
Right. But they do have this inclusionary thing, I was told by somebody who was working with that group. There are a certain number of units within that complex that have to be affordable housing. But it's a time limited thing, like I think they, over 10 years, and then that goes away.
You know, we don't have an ordinance in the city of Missoula. There could have been a negotiation with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency.
This was a church, I think this was, I heard about it through Missoula Interfaith Club.
Okay. So maybe that was a totally separate private deal where Interfaith Collaborative is a group of churches that help house homeless families. And
They
that,
have a lot of different missions, but that's
yeah,
That's
yeah.
part of it.
right.
They may have then done a private negotiation with that apartment owner to have some of those units available for those families.
There was pressure put on them, and I don't know exactly how that occurred. But that's what I was told was the outcome, because it was, a lot of people were pretty upset about how they did that.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely. I don't know any specifics on that. It's encouraging to hear that, and now I'm going to go find out. Because I want to know how they did that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about, has the group looked at co-op housing at all, even for young families and things like that to make it more affordable? Although I don't know if co-op or housing is more affordable.
You know, we have, Commissioner Bill Carey, or past Commissioner Bill Carey, has been bringing this to the community for a long time, and the co-op housing is unlike a condominium. It looks like a condominium, except you actually own a share, like it's a cooperative. You own a share in that apartment complex, or what looks like an apartment complex, and you buy your unit. So it's financed differently, and it encourages more cooperative kind of living and participation. The developers out of Minnesota that have come to Montana to educate us on how it could work have not found it to be very successful for families. There are a few of them around the country, but they're mostly for retirees. And I don't know if that's because people's lives are simpler, if it's an easier housing makeup. It's not, I mean, they repeated to me over and over again, this is not affordable housing. This is market rate housing. It's conventional. It doesn't mean that it can't be affordable. I mean, this is the term that's thrown around all the time. Affordable housing, affordable. Well, if you have enough money, anything's affordable, you know? There's a definition to affordable housing, and that is people that earn 80% or less of the area median income in Missoula. For a single person, that's like $32,000 a year, just to give you an idea. 80% of the area median income. If they paid 30% or less towards their housing, that's affordable housing. That is technically the HUD definition. Now, we know that the definition is much broader than that. We have people that are earning 120% of the area median income. That's, let's just say, $46,000 a year. And they cannot, $48,000 a year, they can't find a home. And these people might be like firefighters, police officers, teachers. These are the kind of folks that are having a hard time finding affordable housing in the community. Where was I going with that? I mean, I think there's also a potential for co-op housing, but it's been so far found to be workable for retiring and senior population. And there's a little bit of a trick there. The market, in order for people to find it attractive, it has to, the mortgage amount has to meet the top rental rate in the community. Otherwise, you don't have enough of a population. But rental rates keep increasing in Missoula. So the good news about that is that it could start to encourage more alternative development types like co-op housing.
But you have to be real careful with your financing.
Absolutely you do.
Those mortgage lenders, you better have 20% down for anything like that or more.
Or more. And co-op housing is pretty interesting. A lot of these structures are, I mean, it takes years of developing a pool of people that are interested in purchasing into a co-op housing building. And then often they need a significant amount of equity because they only want people to have a certain size mortgage. So let's just say that the housing apartment condo for lack of a better term, although it's not a condo, is $100,000. They might say, you need 50% down and you need to take out a $50,000 mortgage. Because if everybody takes out a $50,000 mortgage, there's a bit of an egalitarian system there. I mean, that's the idea with co-op housing, is that you don't have these wild, dramatic swings of income, that you have more income equality. And the other thing about it is that they cap the equity that you can earn. Now, some people are just fine with that. People in my age bracket probably aren't, you know? I mean, millennials, and I'm not a millennial, I'm older than that, but you know, folks that are wanting to build some investment in their home, you know, maybe unfortunately or fortunately, our homes have turned into an investment. It didn't used to be that way, right? So the fact that Wall Street got a hold of housing, voila, it's one of the reasons we're here where we are, but that's another topic. So anyway, they cap the equity that you can earn. Some people like that and some people don't.
And you can't rent it.
And you can't rent it, yeah. So it's a little bit of a marketing challenge, but something that, you know, worth looking at for sure. I think we're over time. 1 o'clock?
1:30.
Oh, we're good, okay.
We're doing good.
The other thing I think is really needed, I don't know how, is people who get in the position where they need assisted living, outrageously expensive because corporations have come in to do it.
I know.
And of course, they don't come in because they are really caring about people who need assisted living. people work there do. The corporation, because it's an investment, it's in a business.
Yeah.
So looking at models that become more affordable, because if somebody ends up needing some kind of assistance, and ends up needing, because they have no family or whatever, 24-hour kinds of supervision, not very, they may end up in a nursing home, spend completely everything out at $70,000 a year, and then get on Medicaid, which costs you and me money.
Exactly.
And so I'm trying to figure out if there's models out there that make, whether even the faith-based ones are not cheap. But how do you create more housing or apartments or clusters where you build that in the affordability?
Yeah, that is the $10,000 question.
Have you seen any of that across the country?
I've talked to somebody recently. It's really pretty fascinating, and I don't know if I should be saying this or not, but there's a potential for this to actually happen in our area.
I know.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So there's a group, and I probably shouldn't say anything because it's not our place to say this yet until it starts to go public, but there is a group that has been looking at alternative housing solutions for seniors, for people that are retiring. The design concept are smaller cottage-style homes that people are forced to interact with each other. Not forced, but have the opportunity to. A lot of our development, think about like a lot of our subdivisions. People meet on their garage door, they pull into their garage door and they walk in their house and they never see their neighbors, never. And they live that way for 40 years. You see people selectively, and maybe that's a good thing, but you see people selectively, and as you're aging and you need help, people don't even see you. It's a really interesting societal question. To me, I really am a firm believer that the way we build things completely affects our behaviors. I ride my bike all the time, but when I have to go out to North Reserve, I drive because I am not biking out there because I fear for my life. So same thing with the housing situation. So there's this concept of building these small units where you have porches that relate to each other and sidewalks and everything is designed in this cottage style environment that people start to create bonds and connections. And when elderly folks are there and they are aging in place, so you've got independent living at first and you're completely capable of living on your own and taking care of your own home, but maybe there's an opportunity to pay into a homeowners association or whatever, and I can get my lawn mowed, right? Because I have a little lawn and my neighbor has a little lawn, and so homeowners associations do that now, but then the idea is that there's not only a facility on site that has services that are already part of the community that come there as an ancillary location, and either can be available for people in the community, but also for that cottage, that cottage village, basically. People can, if I'm independently living, I can still go get those services, or those services can come into the unit. And you have folks that still live in an independent single-family home, small as it might be, that can still get I would say like a menu of services, because not everybody needs that full prescriptive, assisted living. You move into assisted living, you might not need everything that's there, but you pay for it. And then ideally then a location in the same neighborhood, same village, that actually is more advanced care, that has full-on assisted living. But ideally, the experiment with this is that it reduces costs. That's the experiment. It's not been done yet. So they're looking.
Don't we have an organization coming in here? It's got a headquarter out of here that is offering that. And isn't it called Assistance to Youth or something similar to that?
I don't know. Really?
It's a private organization. It's just what kind of things are they doing?
That's exactly what you're talking about, is what they're, not the housing part, but the keeping seniors in place.
Well, there's
a lot
home
of those
instead.
services right
There's
now.
already home instead.
Well, there's more.
And there's other.
Yeah, but this is a
But I
big,
mean, yeah,
this is a
this
big
is
There's all
outfit.
kinds of
It's
home
a
health
conglomerate. They're
services
gonna build a house.
that will do nursing and homemaking
Yeah.
and
Yeah, this is
all that
more
kind of
than that.
stuff. But if it's a private company, again, it typically does a couple of things. One, it's more part-time employees. They don't get benefits. They have high turnover, which people
Then I house those people.
Yeah, you know, and you have these, so then you look at it, the flip side, let's say it's an older adult that needs a service and I got a different caregiver coming in every month, it's pretty rough. So the whole design, but the providing the service in the home, plus not always older adults want to all live around older adults. Some people want to stay, you know, connected
Yeah.
in the community, and I'm not seeing models yet, nor am I, you know, pushing for, because I haven't had time. I'm just thinking that it's if you could encourage the city to strike out the task force, recognizing there are baby boomers that are aging and may want to have options, including affordability. Can't tell you how many people come in and finally pay attention to what they're going to get in retirement, which happens to be only Social Security.
Yeah.
And our foster grandparent senior companion program probably averages $10,000 to $11,000 a year is what those individuals are making on Social Security.
There you go.
And you just don't make it on that. You're too high for Medicaid
Yeah.
and those kinds of things, but you can't afford to pay for private services.
Yeah, they're right in that window,
Yeah,
exactly.
and
there's a lot
that's,
of money.
that's their window for the rest of their lives. So-
Yes.
And I think that's probably more common than not. And I just think intergenerational approach to housing and support is something we need to take a look at.
I totally agree. We've seen some examples of other countries doing that.
Yeah.
Culturally, there's an opportunity there that we might struggle with in this area, so the more we talk about it, maybe we have a chance for some cultural changes. I mean, one of the examples that I think, many of us have seen, maybe it kind of floated around Facebook, and, you know, there was, I think it was a property in Denmark, maybe, where it was assisted living in a daycare, but I think there's one in Seattle. Interesting, because being around children and having a purpose for folks that have, I mean, to some degree, these assisted living situations, people are just being totally warehoused. I mean, it's and then the nursing home situation of it, it's just so sad. And we see with young people too that are disabled and sick. I just a quick little tangent. We had somebody that was living in a nursing home that got into our Equinox property, which is over at the corner of Russell and Broadway. He has cerebral palsy, was real sick for a while, and lived in a nursing home, and was basically warehoused there. Seriously just declining in health. A young man. Got on our waiting list, was able to move into the Equinox, has independent care there, and his life has like flourished. His health has turned around. I mean, he's always gonna have cerebral palsy, but yeah, I mean, I watch him wheel to the grocery store. He's outside, he's doing things. It's really interesting. And from a sheer economic perspective, that saves the taxpayers a whole heck of a lot of money. And somebody's life is so much higher quality.
Yeah, because once you move into an institution, the things to do for yourself and others having the ability to do for you is removed. And so what's purpose?
Yeah.
And so, you know, whether you're helping make a meal by shredding lettuce or whatever you can still do is all taken away when you're in an institution. Or somebody might have been willing to mow your lawn or come over and help with the meal is taken away at a great price. And so the model needs to change, and I hope we can work on that in our community. I know there's a faith-based housing consideration going on, but again, my experience with faith-based, one thing is that it helps in terms of the culture and environment within the facility, but it's not necessarily that, you know, they still review your finances before they allow you to come in. It's based on how long they think it'll last, and will it last long enough before you get accepted into it. So those are those issues.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that I had written down as a discussion question, but we apparently don't need my discussion question. We're doing really good.
I think we're doing really well.
Yeah. Is funding for affordable housing. And, you know, one of the questions that I've written down here is, where does funding come from? And one of the things that I thought I would share with you is that in the state of Montana, we really don't use anything local or state because we don't have anything. There are funding sources that come through the state that, yes, technically go to affordable housing. And as a couple of caveats, that is the Board of Housing can issue bonds and get money for mortgages for first-time home buyers. That does exist in the state of Montana. There's a specialized program for veterans for the same thing. That exists in the state of Montana. There's money through the Medicaid program to house people with disabilities, kind of, through this voucher program. But there's really not a pot of funds that I can access, really, to go out and build the housing that we're talking about. The state of Montana doesn't have any of its own resources. Unfortunately, we're one of the few in the country that don't have a housing trust. We do not fund it through our general fund. And I mean, you know, we're in a unique situation. We're a big state, we have a lot of infrastructure, we don't have a lot of people. Our tax base is the way it is. But it's a problem. It's a problem in the long term because we are using federal sources, and we combine federal sources with private. We've utilized, you know, anywhere from foundation funding, and all of our properties have mortgages. They're all in debt somehow in order to make it happen. That's why we have to charge the rents we do. We can't, like, our rents are not on a sliding scale. If somebody came in with no income and they wouldn't have the opportunity to pay no rent, that's actually not an option, because we have to charge everybody some rent in order to make a mortgage. But in the state, I mean, we're going to have to address this as a citizenry because we don't have enough resources to build the housing we're talking about. And twice in the last 2 legislatures, a group of housing advocates have proposed a bill for a program that the state of North Dakota has, and it's a state tax credit. And it would basically allow corporations and individuals to provide money into this housing trust and get a tax credit back on their state taxes. But we don't have a legislature that is friendly to that issue.
And this is North Dakota?
North Dakota's doing this, and it's
Really,
wildly
you would
successful.
think that we would do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that the same kind of a legislature that we have.
Exactly.
Probably even more conservative than ours.
I think they are. The interesting thing, North Dakota has been impacted more by the Bakken oil boom than
Yeah,
Montana
some money.
has.
Yeah.
And so they've had probably more corporate participation in that respect. But we have the current climate at the legislature has no desire for additional tax credits. They want to simplify the tax code and not complicate it through another tax credit program. That's the argument. So we need to call our legislators. I mean, that's the only thing I can say is that they have to hear from people other than me, quite frankly.
And it has to be outside of Missoula.
Yes, and it has to be outside of Missoula.
It's not the Missoula representatives that are going to say no.
Yep.
That nobody listens to. I mean, you need to find where it matters beyond our walls.
Yeah.
As they roll their eyes when we say Missoula.
Unfortunately, that is the
We tax
case.
people to death here, you know.
I know. Yeah, I know. You're exactly right. I mean, you know, not to get political about it, but the reality is funding sources and, you know, I mean, just like I talked about, like zoning decisions, I mean, that is a political issue because we have to, at some point, address our local zoning, both in the city and in the county, quite frankly, in order to have the land to develop, and the land to develop it right. I mean, we all want to build a beautiful community, and we want to live in a good place. God knows we don't want this place to be, you know, built out with poor development and bad infrastructure, and, you know, we've seen a lot of examples around that around the country, and we don't want that here. We can make good decisions, but, you know, it takes some political advocacy, and it takes some political guts a little bit, and it takes all of us as the public to push that conversation, both at the city level and at the state level. I mean, as a housing provider, I am very concerned with what's happening at the federal level. One of the funding sources that we utilize is called the Home Partnership Program. It's a grant source through HUD. The city of Missoula gets some of that funding, the city of Billings gets some of that funding, and the city of Great Falls, because we're over 50,000 people. So our cities get a small chunk of that money, let's say about $500,000 a year. The state of Montana also gets some of that money, about $3 million a year. This current Congress and Senate has just reduced that funding in the nation by 93%. I mean, they might as well have just defunded it completely. 93%. The state of Montana basically already just said, well, we're not going to even run a program because we can't pay for it administratively. That money we use for bricks and mortar to help build. That money does not build that building, but it helps a whole lot. It helps a whole heck of a lot. It also is some of the money that we can use for down payment assistance. There's a program here in Missoula, there's an organization called the Human Resource Council, and the Human Resource Council can get some of that money and actually lend those grant funds to first-time home buyers.
And that example I was talking about earlier, if somebody has $30,000 to reduce the cost of their house, their housing equation is a whole heck of a lot healthier, excuse me.
I think I got caught on camera.
I knew one was gonna slip out. So the federal government right now has cut that by 93%.
Well, I think people ought to worry about the federal government in general right now for any of the discretionary programs.
That's right.
As a reference to whether it's transportation, aging, disability, all of them,
On the chopping block.
and we have, 2 houses that are more conservative. So, yeah, that'll take all of us to be paying attention and just saying that is, even if it's just to our senators and representatives, they need to hear so we don't end up seeing in the paper that I let them know that no, our Montanans don't want this, when in reality we do. They don't want more money towards affordable housing. Well, yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So make sure they're really saying the message of what really is what Montana wants, not what they decide they want.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, exactly. It is a representative government that they represent us, and so we have to get our voices
And it's the
heard.
worst example of that. I mean, millionaires and above, really? What do they know about you and me?
Well, it's a perfect segue to the topic of our next discussion, which is going to be what's on the ballot.
Ah, cool.
And I hope we can all come back for that on October 29th, and we thank you so much, Andrea.
My pleasure.
Thank you.